Hi, I'm Mike Shumaker with Florida Waterfront Living, and today this video is going to be a little bit different than the normal videos that I do, where I talk about the cost of living here in Florida on the waterfront or specific houses or a canal tour. I'm going to just talk about um, the things that I like about Pasco County, the things I like about living on the water in general. This all applies to, I think, every beachfront community or waterfront community along the Gulf Coast of Florida here. Um, One of the major reasons that I chose to move to the waterfront was because of the crowds. I loved boating, or I do love boating. I love fishing, and it was getting to be a big deal every day that I wanted to go fishing, to take my boat, drive down to the boat ramp, and then wait in a line to get my boat into the water. And the boat ramps were always so crowded, and people were short-tempered, and so there were a lot of issues that I just felt like if I lived on the water, that I would be able to avoid those. So, I've cut out my travel time. I've cut out those issues at the ramp. The other thing is, living on the water, I don't feel like going out on the boat, which right now, if I go out on my boat, I walk out into my backyard. I get into my boat, I push one button, my boat lift lowers my boat down into the water. I back off of my lift and away I go in the canal, and within just a few minutes, I can be up in the mangroves fishing on the flats. I can be out into the Gulf of Mexico. Doesn't take hardly any time at all. But if I feel like I don't want to take the boat out, there are plenty of fish to catch right off of my dock. I mean, I'm constantly seeing mangrove snapper and mullet, catfish, sheep's head. We've seen a few cobia in here. There's some of the canals, the next canal over, the people who live on those canals, they have mangroves right across the canal from them, and they catch a lot of redfish and snook at their houses. Sometimes I'll get in my kayak and just kayak around the corner if I'm wanting to do anything with fishing for anything other than what comes down my canal. On our hottest days here, we almost always have a Gulf breeze. So even in the hot summertime, there's always a nice breeze. And the Gulf of Mexico tends to moderate the temperature. So in the summertime, you get the cooling effect off of the Gulf. And in the wintertime, when it might be 30 miles inland, it's bitter cold. Here you're getting a breeze off of the Gulf, and it's still cold. There's no lie. Not going to lie to you. You feel cold, but it's nowhere near as cold as it is a little bit inland. Some of the other things I like is, and specifically talking about my neighborhood now and the few neighborhoods here right around Hudson, which is in Pasco County, Florida, just north of Tampa. And I suspect that what I'm going to talk about here happens in every single community, because everybody that lives in these communities, they have a common interest. They want to live on the water. And whether they want to live on the water because they like fishing or boating or canoeing, kayaking, sailboating, whatever it is, there's that common element that they all like. They all want to be on the water. So you've got a lot of like-minded people, and so they usually turn out to be pretty good neighbors. The reason I like our neighborhood here in Hudson is because the farther south you go, the more expensive the homes get. They're still somewhat affordable here in Hudson compared to, as you get further down Tarpon Springs, Clearwater, St. Pete, Tampa, and you keep on going south further and further, Apollo Beach, Bradenton, Sarasota, Anna Maria Island, Naples, Fort Myers, all of those places. Those are all beautiful areas, and there are a few affordable neighborhoods, but by and large, the farther south you go, the more expensive that the homes become. And consequently, and the inverse of that is that going north from here, if I were to go further north, I actually run into some other neighborhoods that are even slightly less expensive than what we have here in Pasco County and Hudson. But it gets to a point where when you get up like close to Crystal River, Homosassa Crystal River, the prices start to climb along some of those major rivers that are dumping into the Gulf of Mexico, and the prices go up again. But those are all beautiful homes up there as well, and very, very nice communities. Here in Hudson, Pasco County, we have plenty of places to go shopping. We've got so many restaurants. I've lived here since December of 2019, and we've only made a small dent in being able to go to all the restaurants, and a lot of them, being here on the Gulf of Mexico, their specialty is seafood. Although there are a lot of other types of restaurants. There's everything, the various Asian restaurants, Mexican restaurants, Polish restaurants, and then obviously all your American restaurants. A lot of them are mom and pops, and a lot of these places are national chains, national and regional chains. Another thing I like about Pasco County is there are many, many neighborhoods that do not have an HOA, a homeowners association. Homeowners associations are good because they do a lot for a community. They make sure that certain standards are maintained, and that the homes are not, there's not a lot of stuff laying out in the yards and in the streets and everything, and so it tends to make your home values stay up. But it's also very expensive in a lot of cases to have an HOA. There are a lot of neighborhoods in Hudson that while they don't have an HOA, they have a voluntary community association, and those are generally somewhere in the neighborhood of $25 to $100 a year. Some are a little more. Some, I don't know if there's anybody less than 25, but some are a little more than 100. But they're usually $50, $60, $70 is probably the norm. And some of them will have an additional charge if you want to use the community boat ramp. But like my community here does not have a boat ramp, but I think it's $20 if I want to use a boat ramp over at the Hudson Harbor. And my trailer has been parked since December of 2019. I haven't had my boat on my trailer since then, so I haven't had the need for a ramp. But if I ever needed to get my boat out of the water and take it in for some kind of a repair, instead of calling a mobile marine mechanic, I would have to use that public boat ramp. And like I said, I think it's like $20 to use that. The other thing I really like is the neighbors. Like I mentioned before, we all have common bonds, all pretty much centered around water activities, and everybody seems to help each other all the time. A lot of people joke that, like my community, they'll say that we're a drinking community with a boating problem, and it's really just a joke. I mean, obviously people like to go out to some of the local establishments and have a couple of beers with their grouper sandwich or something. But everybody's just, it's a very tight-knit community. It's a really common occurrence to like have a neighbor invite you over to dinner, and or to show up at your house carrying a bucket of beers or a pie or a cake or whatever they might bring over. Some of the neighbors are like excellent smoke masters, so they'll be smoking some kind of meat or fish or something all the time, and so they all share, and so I mean, just recently I had a neighbor show up, came walking across from 2 doors south of me, across the backyards, and he had a bucket of beers with him, and I was sitting out by my fire pit watching the dolphin in the canal, and we sat there for a couple of hours, and each of us had a couple of beers while we were just sitting there talking. And like I said, that's kind of an everyday occurrence. Just this past weekend, I was having dinner at my neighbor's house, and there was a couple of other neighbors that were from the next subdivision over, and they were there as well. And my neighbor mentioned, from this neighborhood, he mentioned that he was going to put up a privacy fence the next day. He had already bought everything. So the next day, the 2 other neighbors from the adjoining subdivision and my next door neighbor and myself, although I'm getting so old I can't do a lot of the real heavy physical lifting. I was like doing things like handing him tools and beers and whatever. But they proceeded to put up his privacy fence, and something that he had said it was probably going to take him a couple of weeks to do, working on it a little bit every day after work or whatever. They had it done by noon, and decided they were going to build a deck. So they built a large deck and put that up, and had it done by mid-afternoon. And as we're finishing up the deck, we see 2 boats coming down the canal going real slow, and it's one of our other neighbors pulling another neighbor in that had been out in the middle of the Gulf, or had been out, I believe they said he was 6 miles out, and his boat had stopped running, and he had put out a call. I don't know if he called people or if he put a post on one of the local Facebook groups, but he had put out a call for help, and one of the neighbors went out and towed him all the way back in. And it's a nice thing to do, and everybody helps each other that way. We do have Towboat US here, and we do have the various national chains that it will tow you into, but sometimes those are kind of expensive. So if you can get a neighbor to do it, that works out really well. So I'm trying to think. It seems like there was something else that it was like all these things. Everybody was helping everybody, and at the same time, we all said that we were going to go fishing the next day, and at the last minute, the next morning, I had to cancel, and I wasn't able to go. That would have been yesterday morning, and so I didn't go. And when they came back in late yesterday afternoon, they had an ice chest with a bunch of my favorite fish, fresh caught fish in it, and they brought it over and gave it to me, and I just cleaned all of those this morning, and so I'll have a couple of good meals out of that. And that was something they didn't have to do, but they knew that it was my favorite fish, and so they brought it to me. Like I said, I moved here in December of 2019, and for Christmas I got a new fish finder for my boat, and because the fish finder that was in there was like 10 years old, And the neighbor from across the canal from me came over and actually installed the whole thing for me, did the running of all the new wires, putting the transponder on and everything, because I have a hard time getting down and doing anything where I've got to reach down below my foot level, because I'm just getting too old to bend that far. So he did that. And then I had another time where I was out in the main channel leaving the subdivision, and my boat just died. Didn't know what happened. Tried to start it, couldn't get it to start. So my brother was with me on the boat that day, so we called a couple people, and one of the neighbors came out and helped us get my boat back to the to my lift here. And one of the guys from the next subdivision over heard about it, and he says, I'll come over one day this week and see if I can get it running for you. He came over and he spent like 2 hours and wound up figuring, doing the troubleshooting and everything, figured out what was wrong with it, got my boat running, and everything's fine since then. And then another time, I was out there on my lift, on my dock by my lift doing something, and I heard this electric motor running, and I couldn't figure out what it was. So I lowered the boat down a little bit, got on it, was checking in all the hatches and the holds and everything, and I realized that it was the bilge pump was running, but there was no water in the bilge, but it was the sensor was coming on, and but I could not reach down far enough to get to where it was at to be able to disconnect it. So my next door neighbor saw me out there, and he came over, and between the two of us, he got it out of there, and then I took it apart, cleaned it all out, we put it back in, and got that working. So, that was another thing that somebody didn't have to help me do it, but they did. They came over, and let's see. There's just so many of these acts of kindness from people, that our only real common bond is that we live in the same neighborhood, and that we all like being out on our boats or being on the water. And some of these acts of kindness, I would say they're small acts of kindness. Some of them are great acts of kindness. If they're able to do something that somebody else just can't do, that's fine, and everybody just helps each other. Because my career, I spent a lot of time in the IT industry, so anytime I have the opportunity to pay somebody back by doing that, I try to help them out with those kinds of issues. The other thing is, somebody comes over, and they're doing something like that. Generally, I would buy them some kind of a gift or something and give it to them, because none of them will ever take any money. But I wanted to just make this short little video just to kind of tell you how it is here on the water, and how everybody seems to be so nice and helpful, and everybody worries about everybody else. If we hear that there's somebody missing, they didn't come home, and the Coast Guard will be out there, we'll see the helicopter or whatever, but there will be a whole bunch of people that will mobilize on their boats and their kayaks and stuff, because they'll go up into the mangroves and different areas just looking for them. And luckily, most of the time it's a happy ending. They find the person. They just got lost track of the time. They didn't have a radio, and they might have been tucked up somewhere up in the mangroves fishing. And I call them the mangrove tunnels, because some of these areas, if you're on a small flats boat that only drafts about 8 or 9 inches, you can get up into some really tight places. And the mangroves, it'll be a real narrow little path that's like maybe only 8 feet wide or something, and 10 feet wide, and the mangroves are growing over the top of it. So the Coast Guard helicopter can't even see you. So, but that's the kind of community that it is, and the kind of people that we have here. And I just want to invite anybody who wants to look at a house here in Florida, wants to consider living on the water. If you want to come down, give me a call. My contact information is on my About page here on YouTube. And give me a call. I'll get you set up. And I can show you a house anywhere from Naples to Crystal River. And I know all of those areas well. I'm a third generation Floridian. I grew up in Tampa, and most of my time fishing over the years has been in the area right around Tampa, both freshwater and saltwater, all up in the rivers and canals and lakes, and in the Tampa Bay and in the Gulf of Mexico. So I know all of the areas pretty well, some better than others, but I can help you navigate through all of the issues that you would encounter when you're trying to purchase a waterfront home, making sure that if you have a specific boat that you own, or a specific boat that you want to own, or a class of boat that you want to own, we can make sure that we only look for houses that have water deep enough to support your goals, you know, giving you the ability to get to your home on the boat that you want. And it's not just the depth of the water, it's also whether or not there are any bridges or any kind of overpasses or anything that you have to be able to go under as well. Because some neighborhoods, you can only get a boat that's not very tall at all into them. So, but anyway, that's all for today. And I appreciate you watching. If you like this video, please press like and subscribe. And I hope to see you in Florida soon. Thank you.